Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
I think it goes without saying that staff turnover is a problem that most, if not all, business owners and executives would prefer to avoid whenever possible. But that said, in the process of building your team, some turnover is bound to happen. We'd only hope earlier than later. And therein lies one of the bigger challenges. While you might turn over a team member for any number of reasons, the biggest problem I've seen with this is not hiring the wrong person, but rather holding on to a non-performing personnel for far too long. And obviously this creates a number of issues, not least of which is the stress it creates for your practice and the rest of your team. You have a non-performer that others are having to pick up the slack for. And this non-performer, in addition to, not performing, is also doing things that potentially damage your practice and the goodwill in your patient base. So why does this happen? And more importantly, are there any signs you should be looking for early on? I mean, very early on, to see if it would be better to cut your losses now before this employee becomes a potential problem down the road. Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host, and the concept I'll be discussing today, early detection of a problem employee, assumes a few things about your hiring process. First, it assumes that when you're hiring, you're not making any strange accommodations. Meaning, if you need someone to, let's say, be a dental assistant 4 days a week and they need to be there from 9 to 5, you're not hiring somebody who can only work from noon to 2 and every other Wednesday or something weird like this. Or you're hiring a scheduling coordinator who doesn't like talking to people on the phone. In other words, the person you're hiring can do the functions of the job. They can be there and are capable of doing the functions of the job as it's supposed to be done. Second, it assumes that you actually described the job to the prospective employee during the hiring process, including the expectations. Now, this is an important part of the hiring process, and I've spoken about it in prior episodes, but when you're hiring somebody, you should not only describe, what the name of the job is, but you should describe the duties. They should know what the hours are. They should know what the pay is, and they should also know what the expectation is. If you're hiring somebody to handle your schedule, for instance, they should know that they're going to be expected to increase productivity by, X percent, or have a properly scheduled schedule in accordance with your office policy, which is you do primary procedures in the morning, and so on. In other words, they know what is expected of them. They know how much it's going to pay, when they have to work, etc. Because if you don't explain this from the get-go, and then they come on board and there's some, large portion of the job, like something that would be a critical error, so to speak, like they can only work 4 days a week and you're expecting them to work 5, well, that's going to create problems from the very beginning. And not to judge, but you were partially responsible for that problem. So we're assuming you're telling them all about the job, what it pays, what's expected, what the duties are, and things like this, so that they understand exactly what they're getting themselves into. And the third thing I'd expect as part of your hiring process is the person has the basic qualifications required to actually do the job. Obviously, with a licensed provider, that's a no-brainer. That's a legal point. They have to have a license to practice and malpractice insurance and things like this. But, beyond that, let's say you're hiring somebody, to be a dental assistant, and their plan is to work for you for 3 months till they find a better job. Well, to me, I wouldn't hire somebody like that. I mean, when you hire somebody, obviously you're hoping they work for you forever if it works out well, but you can't guarantee anything from the get-go, but you want to make sure that they're not trying to get out of there in 5 minutes. Yeah, that might be a bit off the wall. Anyway, so those are the 3 things I'm assuming you're doing as part of your process, okay? There's other things too we could talk about, but let's just assume those basic points are in. They know what they're getting themselves into. You're not making weird accommodations. You're not settling, in other words. You're getting somebody who actually is a good fit. So assuming you've done that and you have these basic concepts in place, what are the signs that maybe it's just not going to work? Well, the biggest one that you can watch for right away is repeating mistakes. Now, if you're familiar with MGE, you know that the basis of our curriculum is the Hubbard management system developed by American philosopher L. Ron Hubbard. Mr. Hubbard spent over 30 years developing this system, and his works on management consist of literally millions of words and cover just about any aspect of management you'd think of, from strategic planning to executive skills, financial management, team building, and so on. And if you want to know more about the Hubbard management system, I'll put a link to the MGE site MGE website where we explain it here on the episode webpage. But the concept on mistakes that I'm going to be covering with you here comes from an article written from Mr. Hubbard, and we go over it in our HR and personnel seminar when we're doing our executive training. So he begins with this. He says, he who cannot be hatted, and I'll define that in a minute, he who cannot be hatted will not learn by mistakes. So now, what does he mean by hatted? Well, let's first start off with what is a hat? And you may have even used this term before. So what is a hat? Well, here's how Mr. Hubbard defines it. A hat is the duties of a position. It comes from the fact that jobs are often distinguished by a type of hat, as fireman, policeman, conductor, etc. Hence the term hat. On a train, a locomotive engineer and a conductor each wears a different kind of hat. You'll notice that various jobs in society are designated by different hats. From this, we get the word hat as a slang term, meaning one's specialized duties. This is one's hat. So if I'm the dental assistant, what is my hat? It's my specialized duties. So I'm responsible for assisting the doctor and doing any parts of the procedures that I'm allowed to do legally or that I'm capable of doing. I'm also responsible for maybe ordering supplies, stocking the rooms, and so on. This is all part of my hat. I'm there to facilitate the doctor so that the doctor can become more productive. Okay, that's my hat. So you can kind of derive from being that that's what a hat is, what the concept of hatted or hatting is. But I'll give you a definition for it. Here's the definition of hatting. Hatting, the action of training or the training given to a person so that he or she can produce the products of his or her job. So we have a hat. So let's say you have a receptionist or a scheduler. They have the hat of scheduler, and they have the various duties they do. You know, they answer the phone, they schedule patients, they do recall, etc. And hatting would be the training that we give to this person so that they're able to actually do it, right? Based on this definition, it's the training given to a person so that he or she can produce the products of his or her job. So if we're hatting a scheduler, what would we teach them? We teach them how to answer the phone, how to use the phones, how to use the software that we use in the practice, the appointment book, etc. How to handle a patient who's maybe trying to cancel last minute, how to fill a last minute opening, how to structure a schedule so that it's productive, and so on. Okay, it's training specifically for the job. So we have hats and hatting. So with that in mind, those definitions, I want to read that first line again here. So he says, again, he who cannot be hatted will not learn by mistakes. He goes on, it isn't making mistakes that is actionable. Now, to interject, what does actionable mean? It's a reason for taking action, normally disciplinary action. Okay, so maybe somebody was late for work five times. Now that's actionable. We're going to take disciplinary measures now. All right, so I'll read that again. It isn't making mistakes that is actionable. It is failing to learn from them and repeating them. A failed student is apparently somebody who can't be hatted either, and they are detected by somebody who makes the same mistake over and over and doesn't correct themselves. So I'll interject for a second here, and then I'll continue on with what Mr. Hubbard says here. So I want you to imagine you're training a receptionist, and the way the phone is supposed to be answered in your practice is, it's a great day at ABC Dental. My name is Jeff. I can help you. Maybe that's whatever. However you answer your phone's fine. I'm just throwing this out there. So you sit down with me and you go, okay, Jeff, this is how we do it. It's a great day at ABC Dental. My name is Jeff. I can help you. It's a little script. So you have me do it a few times. And I go, okay, great. And I pick up the phone and I answer the phone. Hello? And you have to grab the phone, and answer the phone correctly. You go, Jeff, let's do this again. It's a great day at ABC Dental. Okay, good. And I get it right. So then I pick up the phone next time. Dental office. I'm making the same mistake over and over. And maybe I do it right in between. I do it right once, and then again the next time I screw it up. Okay? I'm making the same mistake over and over and over again. You have a dental assistant who continuously hands you the wrong instrument, despite the amount of time and effort that you've spent trying to teach this assistant what the instruments are and what they're called when you ask for one. They're making the same mistakes over and over, and they are not correcting themselves. So Mr. Hubbard goes on here in this article. I'll read the rest here. He says, thus it's possible to detect a failed student by somebody who makes the same mistake. We're not unduly concerned with somebody who is unhatted. I'll read that again. We are not unduly concerned with somebody who is unhatted. And I'll interject here, because if you think about it, when you hire anybody and they're brand new, they're always unhatted. They've not been hatted, right? Based on the definition I gave you earlier for what you hired them for. New people have no idea what's going on. That's the whole problem with new people. Not that it's a problem, but new people walk in, it's a new office, especially if they're new to dentistry. There's all this new terminology. But that's fine. Everybody was new to dentistry at some point in time. Okay. So he again says we are not unduly concerned with somebody who is unhatted. He goes on, we are only concerned with people who cannot be hatted. And these are the easiest to detect by observing when they make the same mistake without correcting themselves. This person is not only dangerous on lines, but also, frankly, can't be utilized. Where you have someone who does not learn from his mistakes and cannot be hatted, it is better to replace the person rather than just hope. So I want you to think this through for a minute. So what is training when you think about it? If you're training me how to answer the phone, I mean, sure, you might say, Jeff, you have to smile when you answer the phone. You have to be friendly, etc. Okay, fine. But when you're training me how to answer your phone or even how to use your phone, okay, what are you essentially asking me to do? You're asking me to replicate what you did. That's essentially all you're doing. If you take a look at, let's say you're an office manager, or your office manager has trained a scheduler. So you're an office manager, you're a doctor with an office manager who has trained a scheduler. Well, you'll find the scheduler was taught to handle, patients who are canceling, patients who want to move their appointments, etc. Who taught them how to handle that? Probably the office manager. So they're sort of doing the same things that the office manager did, and they watched. Maybe something was written up on it that they could read. This is what you do to fill a last minute opening. Or maybe the office manager sat with them at the front and they watched the office manager do it, and the office manager sort of apprenticed them, and then they did it and they corrected the employee as they were doing it. But essentially they're doing the same thing. Even if you look at professional training, you're being taught basic data so that you can kind of continue on what people who came before you did. Even with a new technique, you're having to learn it from somebody. You're having to replicate essentially what someone else did. And of course, there's plenty of room within that to be creative and put your own signature on everything and so on. I'm not trying to say there's no individuality associated with this, but essentially you're doing what people did before. Okay. You're replicating things people did before. So you've got this new employee. What do we do with a new employee? We're basically going to give them, unless they really know what's going on. And even then, you don't want to assume too much because they're new to you. Okay. Regardless of what they said they did at the other office, they're new to you. So you're going to give them simple things to do that don't have catastrophic consequences on the practice or without any oversight, so that they can't create a big problem, right? You're not going to just tell some brand new employee who you don't know from, you just met him 2 days ago, I need you to fill the schedule for next week. I mean, maybe they'll pull it off, but that's kind of dangerous with no oversight. You're going to give them simple things to do that you can teach them to do very easily to lighten your load so that you can eventually free yourself up a bit as you feed them parts of their job. Okay. So it usually starts off simple. We recommend with a new employee, maybe somebody who's new to dentistry. And it's unfortunate. I've talked about this before. Where is the newest employee usually put in a dental practice? I mean, an administrative employee. They're usually put answering the phones, which is a terrible idea because they're taking all your new patient traffic, which is terrible. They have no idea about anything, and you're making them answer your telephone. That's the last place I would put a new person. I would want somebody who was sharp answering my phones and handling new patients. But beside that, so what would I do with this new person, especially with no dental experience? I'd probably have them doing recall or reactivation, because you can teach somebody how to schedule a cleaning pretty easy. You don't call a child directly to schedule their cleaning. You call their parents, and a child cleaning is this long and an adult cleaning is this long. And this is our software. And this is how you can find 30 minutes available here or 40 or 50 minutes available there. And this is the hygiene schedule. These are things you could teach somebody very quickly. And if they haven't been in for X amount of years, they're basically getting a new initial exam. What's an initial exam? You define that for them. It's not difficult to teach somebody. And then you have them start doing that. Then you can see, can this person actually work? Well, let's assume you've done this with them. You've shown them this is how you make a checkup appointment with a patient. This is what you say when you call. You might even have a little script and you have them read it and you kind of maybe do some role playing with it. And then you put them on the phone and they do the exact opposite of what you told them to do. Maybe they screw something up. Maybe they put it on the doctor's schedule and you show them, no, that's the doctor's schedule. Look at the color of this column. Look at the room number. That's the doctor's schedule. And they'll put them in here. And then they do it again. And then they do it again. You'd know within 3 or 4 days that this person isn't going to work out. They're repeating the same mistake over and over. But remember, being that training is replication, right? They're not replicating what you taught them. So if they can't do that, simple stuff, how to schedule a checkup appointment or how to do something simple, maybe even it could be something as silly as how to straighten up the reception area, or maybe the opening checklist for the office. You turn this music on, you do this, you do that, and they keep missing things. How in the world, if they can't do simple stuff like that, are you going to give them a manual for a specific job in your practice, whatever that job might be, financial coordinator, treatment coordinator, etc., and expect them to be able to do anything in that manual? They can't do the simple stuff. There is no way they're going to be able to do the more complex stuff. You have somebody that you can't train, and that's a problem. And, I've seen our clients get into this a little bit because, when a client first comes on board, they're pretty convinced, in some cases, not always, that the problem's the staff, right? If they have problems with staff, it's the staff, not them. Then they learn a bit about organization and training, things like that. And then it's almost like a grandfather clock with a pendulum. The pendulum swings to the other side. Now it's all my problem. It has nothing to do with the staff. When really you want it to be a happy medium. There are staff that are difficult or impossible to train, or the ability to train them is not within the parameters of what you're trying to do in your practice. You could train anybody, I assume, if you had a long enough time, but based upon what is needed in your dental practice, you don't have the facilities to train this person. You need somebody who can get with it a little bit faster. Okay, that's really all it is. But so there's like a happy medium. There are staff that, just shouldn't be kept, and you should be training people. So you want to be somewhere in the middle on this, right? But then the reason I say this is you might be sitting there, with this employee who's made 5 mistakes in a row, all the same mistake. Now, I'm not talking about like they made a mistake because new people are going to make mistakes, but usually they should correct. But let's say somebody makes a mistake, they correct. They don't make that mistake again. Then they make another mistake, but it's a different one, and they correct. That's normal. That's a part of training. That's just generally what happens. I mean, here at MGE, thankfully, I've had the same receptionist for, well over 10 years. It's been awesome. But I remember when we were first hiring receptionists, inevitably within day 1 or 2, I'd see our new receptionist walking around the block with our HR director crying. Inevitably, they had dropped a phone call and felt terribly upset about it. Now, dropping a phone call is horrible. I hate that happening, but it's going to happen, especially with somebody who's new. So it was like, listen, we expect that. Mistakes, it's going to happen, whatever. If they continued to drop phone calls, then they wouldn't work as a receptionist. You're getting the flavor of this. So rather than sitting there and wondering, is this person going to work? Aren't they? Take a look if they're making the same mistake over and over. Then, you can get into this frame of mind with turnover where you go, I don't want to be known as a person who turns over employees. Turnover is bad. I mean, there's a truth to that, and there's an untruth to that. Sure, you don't want to continuously turn over staff, okay? But if I was going to turn somebody over, I'd rather do it fast before they got fully ingrained in my business. I've hired somebody, and I've known after a week or two this person's a problem, but I keep them for 6 months. I've seen people do this. Then people get to know them. They make friends with the other staff. They go get an apartment closer to the office when I've been wanting to fire them since week 2. That's really unfair to the employee. I'd rather, turn them over within a week or 2. That makes more sense to me. It may seem horrible or heartless, but it actually is better for them. It's more fair to the employee. This isn't working for me. It's probably not going to work for them. They should just move on. But you're not going to see as negative an effect from that because you haven't given them a chance to really settle in and create any issues in the office. Okay? Because the idea is I don't want you afraid to go out and hire the wrong person, where someone's petrified of hiring the wrong person, and then you potentially miss out on some good people. You're going to, no matter how good you are, I can teach you to eliminate, 80 or 90% of the error, but there's still a 20 to 10% chance, or a 10 to 20 rather, that you might hire a dud. It's going to happen. Or maybe they're not a bad person, but they're just not a good fit for your business. It's going to happen. But then you don't want them to be there for too long. Okay, so I wouldn't fixate on this whole turnover thing to the detriment of your business and instead hold on to somebody who really shouldn't be there. Just get them out fast and realize this doesn't make these folks that you're not keeping bad people. I've met people that I've let go that I'd have lunch with. They're nice enough people. I just could not employ them. I could not work with them. You see? So, why keep them around and add statistics and, all of this different type of stuff and burn hours and hours training them? Because that's where the real work begins. I'd rather move on with a candidate that's a better fit for the business. Now, as far as other things you'd be looking for that could be potential problems, it's funny because it all goes back to this repeating mistakes concept. What the normal things you hear? Their attitude was bad. They didn't seem very willing to do their job. They weren't on time regularly. Right? Well, think about that for a second. If someone's attitude is bad and you point that out to them and then their attitude's bad again, aren't they repeating the same mistake? Or how about if they're late and you point out, hey, you're late, and then they're late again? Aren't they repeating the same mistake? It kind of all goes back, not to make just a one sentence answer to everything, but Mr. Hubbard really hit the nail on the head with this thing. This repeating mistakes, for me at least, has been a huge help in detecting somebody who could end up being a problem for my business before they get too ingrained in the business, which is more fair to me and to the employee, because then they know this isn't going to work and they can move on to something else. And then you're bringing in people who really are going to stick with the business. So listen, don't settle on this stuff. Don't hold on to people that you don't think you should be holding on to because, it's tough to find people or whatever. Bad idea. If someone's productive, again, I'm not an employment attorney. If you have questions about that stuff, you can always talk to one. But, here's my take on this. I wouldn't settle. I wouldn't hire somebody for the sake of hiring somebody. If I had somebody that I was pretty sure I needed to let go, I wouldn't wait till I found somebody else. I would just let them go because why keep them in the business? It's not fair to them. And, then what you'll find is you'll build up a really good team of people who really want to be there and do a good job. Anyway, short episode this week, but I thought it was it's a simple yet a very powerful data that I figured that would be helpful to you. I hope it did help. If you want to hear more episodes like this, take a minute to like or subscribe or follow the podcast on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or Google. Otherwise, folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.